welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Blueprint podcast, powered by Lapolis Electric. I'm your host, Steven Marcelino, Vice President of Sales with Lapolis Electric, and today I have guest Walter Bushey with me, and he is the co-founder of Momentum Now. Walter, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's super to be here today.
Thank you very much for coming on. I know you mentioned while you were coming down that you hit about 3 hours of traffic, so I really appreciate your perseverance of making it here this morning.
Oh, sure. Believe me, it's always a pleasure. But I'll tell you what, trying to hit the North Jersey into New York traffic is amazing on a Monday morning.
Yeah, always fun. And then you add in all the let's say the mindless drivers on the road, and they cause accidents along the way, as you said. It makes for a journey, to say the least.
Definitely, quite a journey.
Speaking of journeys, I know you and I speak a bit about your history in the electrical construction and engineering industry, and you have quite an interesting background. A little bit off the path from the typical, wake up and report to a job site every day, so to speak. I know you mentioned to me you have some experience working on the naval ships for the United States military. And, I wanted to give you the opportunity to just, talk about that and explain to our listeners what that looks like, working with the U.S. government, working for the military, and nonetheless working on a naval military ship. That sounds extremely interesting, and I'm sure it's something that people don't hear a lot about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, definitely. It is actually really quite a journey, and really interesting from the fact that I started the business really young. Came out, and it was the mid '80s when I got into the electrical field, and by '89 I had started the company. And just through luck of chance, an uncle had said he was doing some pipe work on a Navy ship in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and they needed some electrical advice. And I, took the chance, went over and, met with a soup ship on the base, and we started working out from there. And it was really pretty interesting because it took me along a 12-year journey through everything from ship overhauls, wet docks, dry docks. You're just going through complete overhauls, transformations of everything from aircraft carriers to, just transport vessels.
Wow.
And started here in New York, and then, of course, moved over to Bayonne, and then off to Philadelphia, Virginia, and pretty much every place we had a base. And that went on for probably about 5 years, all home side. And then after, we started getting into like the early 90s, the war came about, and
Desert Storm?
yeah, and it hit like a storm.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of crazy because the first thing we had was there was a ship, the USS Seattle, and they had fans that basically cool down the generators and everything on the ships, and it brings up all the engine room coolants back into the systems. And they had a failure on one of these 4160 setups, so
wow.
they called us and they said, we're going to ship you out. So they shipped us out to the Mediterranean, and we did this on board, and that was our first time that we actually took the dive.
So you
went
weren't
out,
only nation, on the nation side, being in America. You went international to assist the military and
yeah. So wherever
working on the
wherever
ships.
we had to go. Sometimes we get dropped by helicopters, and sometimes we brought out by launch ships, and things like this, which were really kind of interesting, and sometimes a little unnerving.
Yeah,
So it was really pretty. It was pretty interesting, to say the least. But you get out there and you leave here, and it's the middle of November, and you figure it's a beautiful 70-degree day back here in the United States, where we are in the Northeast, and you get out there and all of a sudden, oh wow, it's 115 in the shade. And there's not much shade anyway on a Navy ship, but
Yeah, you're in the
unless
middle of
you're
the ocean.
indoors. But yeah, and it's just like, wow, it's crazy just to know that you're starting to get into into this different types of scenarios. So we rode with the ship on the way back, and so we were there on board for probably about 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
And then we ended up getting dropped to Scotland and worked off our time there. So,
That's very
but yeah, it was really pretty it's really pretty interesting to say the least.
So when you're working on the naval ships, how does the electrical infrastructure on a naval ship differ from the electrical infrastructure, let's say, in a commercial tower or an industrial facility, on the land?
Right. Well, um, there's first of all, there's two different classifications. Okay, there's in the Navy ships, and we also worked along with the Navy. We did, MSC, Military Sea Lift Command. We also did Army Corps of Engineers, and believe it or not, even the U.S. Army has ships.
Oh,
Most
wow.
people don't even realize that. And some of these ships are also marine, amphibious vessels and stuff like this. But in all, these ships, they're fairly similar with the systems, but they do like a floating ground system, so it's really not the same as what we have, on land and here in America. But like, suppose you were to think about it pretty systematically. Say you're looking at a 120 volt line or a 110 volt line.
Hmm.
So generally, you're going to test. You have, if you're going to go to neutral, you're going to go to ground. You're going to make your tests. You have 120 volts either way, right?
Yep.
So when you're going to turn around and test this, you basically have 55 volts per leg.
Oh, wow.
So that's how you kind of come up with your voltage, like that type of thing. That's why, like, when ships get struck by lightning and stuff like that, it goes through the vessel around the shell of the vessel and then straight down to the floor,
Oh, wow.
to the ocean bed. So that's how it's trying to find its path of least resistance. It's trying to get to the ocean floor. So it generally doesn't go through the ship. It goes around that outside shell of the ship. So the entire ship is therefore at that point is the technically the grounding of the system.
On these ships, I mean, because you're, like you mentioned, you're going all over the world. These ships are going out to war. What kind of, like testing are they doing of the electrical infrastructure, on the ships to assure that the systems are properly operating? You come into New York City, you're testing a tower, you're testing a solar application or whatever it may be, and you approach the infrastructure, whether you're working on a switchgear or transformers, breakers, whatever the situation is. You're going to do some mega readings, contact resistance readings on the transformers, winding resistance and turns ratio testing. You're going to do trip testing on breakers to make sure all the OCPDs are in proper shape and reacting the way they should be. Are you guys performing similar tests, or is anybody in the Navy performing similar tests to pretty much commission, the infrastructure, so to speak, and confirm it's properly operating?
So the Navy has a lot of systems set in place. So as far as like the regiments on how they do things, so it's continuously being checked, but checked under operation. So they really get a chance when they go in for these overhauls to go over the entire ship, and that's when they really go over it. But believe it or not, most of that testing and most of that workmanship is actually being performed by subcontractors.
Gotcha.
So I would say probably about 95% of it, very, very little actually gets done out at sea,
Okay.
by the Navy. Okay. They do have electrical shops on the ship. There's usually two electrical shops, basically with duplicate of everything that they have in each shop in case it's their backup plan, in case they were to get, torpedoed or something's going to happen. If it happens to damage their electrical shop, they still have another shop with everything that was
Backed
in
up.
that shop. So it's a backup. So the problem that I always found with the Navy is that out of 2,500 people on a vessel, generally speaking, 1,500 to 2,500, depending upon the size, what ends up happening is there's usually a career guy, I'll call him, okay, a chief or somebody like that, a first chief,
Gotcha.
master chief or something, who is the head of that department. So whether it be the electrical department or whatever have you, that guy is the one who's really in charge
Gotcha.
of that department. So he's the one with the ultimate say of what's going on. He's also the head instructor, we'll say. Most of the other electricians on the ship are actually guys that, to their credit, they're really trying. I mean, they're young guys, they're trying, but they don't have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Most of these guys came in at 17, 18 years old, went through the whole process. Now it's, they're 18, 19 and they're on a vessel. And it's their first time, usually being away from home. Most of them don't have much experience in the working world, and this is now how they're going to learn, and hopefully go on to the future, either to stay with the military and become a first themselves and move up to another vessel, and that'll be their ship, or they're going to go out into the real world and take that knowledge that they've gained into the world. Okay.
Gotcha.
The only problem I find with that is that there's not a lot of qualified people to really do the work. Unfortunately, if something happens, in desperate needs, time.
Being
So
the reason they had guys like yourselves helicoptered in and dropped onto a ship
exactly.
to make repairs or test something or do whatever
Yeah.
it may be in the time of need.
Yeah, so I mean, like we did so many generator overhauls and stuff. My first real job out on over in North Shipgo was we basically had to take a standby diesel generator package and basically upend the whole diesel engine
Wow.
and the whole generator, rebuild the engine, then remove the armature out of the generator, out of the stator section, and cut a hole through the side of the vessel,
And bring it out.
basically, and pull it right out. Using
Wow.
chain falls, bring it out, and then crane it off the side of the ship and get it up. There's just no way to get it
No, there's no way to
anywhere
maneuver
else.
it.
You got to remember when these things are put in place, they're put in place before the ship is actually,
The ship is built
it's
around
built around it. Exactly.
generator.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very
Around
interesting.
everything. I mean, they start with a keel and then they start building their infrastructure.
Wow.
And then they build the ship around it.
And is there like a difference, when you're pulling the cable and doing terminations, is there a major difference from the cable that you're using on a ship and the type of hardware and whatnot that you're using to terminate, or how does that look?
So, like in most houses, if you're looking at most homes, like say, New Jersey, whatever, it's used Romex. In the city, you're going to end up using MC cable. You're running a lot of conduit and stuff like this, EMT and stuff like this. So, I mean, that's just, traditionally electrical work. So, when it comes to naval work, the wiring that you use, 90% of it's actually exposed wiring. And there's reasons why it's exposed, so that it's much easier to visually get to see if there's a problem. Also, it's most of the areas on a vessel are going to be enclosed, confined spaces. So if you have a wire and say it's made, like look at the jacketing on like say Romex or something like this. If you were to burn that cable inside of an enclosed space, you'd probably kill yourself. Okay, because basically you're going to become asphyxiated very quickly.
Yeah.
So on military, we use wires, different designations like say LSTGU and stuff like this. So they're low smokes. They're basically for the weather resistance and things like this and harsh environments, because there's a lot of oils and paints and stuff like this and flammables. They are a PVC base, but they're a low smoke style and non-toxic. Okay. Then the cable as it's made, it almost looks like a Chinese finger where it's braided with stainless steel braid over top of that.
Gotcha.
And that does two things. It allows for pulling as you're pulling cable. You can pull it through steel members and things like this without shredding the cable.
Gotcha.
And it also helps for heat resistance. It helps to keep it bound so that it doesn't expand the
interesting.
cable. Okay. When you see a wire that has been overheated, you'll actually see the bubbles coming through the braid.
Oh, wow.
So and that's a good, so a lot of times you'll see like because it is exposed, sometimes it'll take a shot, you'll hit it with something and damage the cable. If it overheats, that's the point you're going to see the bubble.
Wow.
So then we don't use like on ships we don't use regular straps, MC straps and things
Nothing
like
like
this.
that.
Now, so what we do is when you're an electrician, you on a naval vessel, you kind of have to have like I don't want to call it jack of all trades, but you kind of have to either learn some of this stuff or bring other individuals with you. So you're going to have to go through bulkhead walls and stuff like this. It's all steel, so you're going to have to either plasma cut or torch, a way through, and then you're going to have to arc weld stuffing tubes. So the tubes go through the walls, and of course there's certain depths and penetrations you're going to have to go through, and then you run the wires through, and you put in what we call packing and packing nuts. So that makes it a watertight seal and a certain amount of pressure to keep that water from transferring between compartments.
Wow.
So if you were to close off a watertight bulkhead door, and the ship is sinking or, you have water coming in, it's not going to make it through and just fill up like a hose. It's going to
Wow.
keep this thing watertight. So then you're, a lot of welding. So even something so simple as, hey, we're going to strap this wire up across here.
Not
It's
so
let's get
simple.
these steel studs. You gotta, first you got 20 minutes just to chip off, old lead paint. And of
Wow.
course it's lead paint.
Yeah.
I mean, think about safety today, right? I
Yeah.
mean, everything from lead-based paints to, asbestos, it's all out there. It's
Yep.
it's there. So you definitely have to take that into account too. Everything takes a lot longer. It's a lot more intense.
Wow.
You're going to run a wire like to a helo deck light or something, cut a hole through the deck and start mounting helo deck lights or something. And it's, something that would normally out in the field take you 3 days. It's going to take you a month.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's a huge difference.
So there's no get it done quick
No,
on
there's
those
no,
ships.
there's no
It's
get it
all
done
thought
quick.
out. There's a process behind it.
Yeah.
And everybody has the understanding of the time frame in which the construction is going to take, so to speak.
Before a job is even done, there is a list that you have to go and submit first. Every single step, the time involved,
Like a method of procedure.
complete, and they actually just call it, Naval FC procedures.
Wow.
And that's what we do. We go through, and you have to write these procedures. They have to get inspected first through a panel and then approved.
So everything from logistics to construction to
Everything.
completion, there's a process
Everything.
for every step of the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow, that's crazy.
yeah.
So let me ask, being your experience on these ships, how did assuring the electrical infrastructure on the ships was very strong, no flaws, like you just mentioned, the process is very tedious and precise. How did this guarantee the ship's success during a time of war?
Well, when you're out at war, and I wasn't physically on board the ships during, their actual, combat or anything like that. And that's pretty much would be a no-no. Okay, you're a civilian. You're not going to be. They're not going to put you in harm's way unless something drastic happened, and it just so happened you were there when something happened. And thank God that never happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank God.
But for instance, crosswire winch system went down on one of the vessels. Okay. If this does not, when you make the repair, if this does not happen, that vessel is not going to be able to transfer its fuel from that vessel over to the aircraft carrier. You're shutting
wow.
down a complete operation. Okay. So that's desperate wartime need. If you do not have the crosswire winch system, you're not going to get those, 6-inch, hoses crossing vessel to vessel to
Wow.
feed fuel. So you're not going to get JP5 fuel over for the jets.
And that would affect
I mean, countless
I
operations.
mean, unbelievable that you're disabling fighter jets, helicopters,
Yeah.
whatever it may be that they need to deploy from that warship
Sure.
to aid whatever's going on land.
Yeah, it's completely, it so much falls down upon the electrical infrastructure on the ship.
Yeah.
Let's face it, if the electric goes down on the ship, you've got nothing.
Yeah, it's the
got
same
nothing.
ideology if the electric goes down in a building or in a manufacturing facility.
Sure, yeah, the
There
line
is
goes
no
down, there's
operation.
no, right, exactly.
There's nothing.
Exactly.
And in that situation, you're literally a sitting duck.
Yeah, you're a sitting duck,
no
you're
pun
you're a
intended.
floating duck that's going the
Yeah.
wrong way probably because you're just taking wherever the tides are taking you.
And I'm sure everything you guys are doing, aside from everybody having lights, if there's damage in the infrastructure, the sonar systems aren't going to work, the radars aren't going to work, they're not going to be able to launch torpedoes properly. I mean, it's pretty amazing, how in depth the electrical infrastructure is on the ship. I mean, I think us being in the electrical industry, we truly deeply understand the importance of electricity.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, even the smartest people in the world take electricity for granted
Sure,
because they always expect it to work.
it's always going to be there.
And when it doesn't work, that's when you realize, like, oh shit, we have a serious problem.
Yeah, it's not just lights out.
No, it's
It's
not.
lights out.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, yeah.
So before we shift to your current business endeavors in the electrical industry, why don't you tell us what was the most memorable experience you had on working on a naval ship?
In the middle of Hurricane Hugo, which was obviously a number of years ago.
Hmm.
We had a ship with a bow thruster problem, and this ended up transferring back to a rudder stabilization problem. And basically, their system shifting back and forth between main power and emergency standby generator power had caused a backup. And so on the ships, most of the switching are rotary.
Hmm.
Okay. So the rotary style switches, they're heavy integration switches. Everything runs. You've got to figure this is like a 40 amp switch just to pull a relay.
Wow.
So it's a three phase. They run 460 on that particular setup, and the switch basically had grounded out on the one phase and blown out the system. Okay,
Wow.
so they could not transfer power back and forth, and the main engine system had failed.
That's not good.
Okay, so yeah, and it was an older ship. So on this particular ship, it was really it was a bad night. Okay, and it was the middle of basically the North Atlantic, freezing cold water. If you're going in to drink, you're going in for good probably.
Yeah.
Okay, it's
Hypothermia
it's
instantly.
2 o'clock in the morning, pitch dark. Sea is raging. They put us on a launch ship and they put us out there. So the launch ship, basically, you come up along the side of the vessel, they open up a hatch on an upper deck, and they drop over a boatswain ladder to you. Okay, and they take the ship and they run it into the side. It's got a big rubber pad in the front of it.
Yeah.
They run it into it, and they give it basically full power to hold the ship up against the ship.
Oh,
The
interesting.
problem is that the ship goes up
Yeah.
and then drops, and then it comes up and it skips its way up the ship again, and the sea's raging. It's got 35, 40 foot waves, so you're just going up and down. So I'm up in the front of the ship,
Shit.
and I turn around, and this guy says, "You ready? When the ship goes up, jump and grab the chair, okay, the base chair from the ladder." And I said, "Okay." And he says, "Really jump as high as you can, because the ship's going to drop out from under you, and you want to get high, because if the next wave's higher, it's going to cut your legs off when it
That's
comes
nice.
back up."
That's good peace of mind.
So he's like, "Get on that ladder and pull with all your might and get you up there fast. Get up. You want to get 5, 6, 7 feet as quickly as you can before that boat comes back up." So I luckily we all made it up there, and we had some pretty special tools at the time, that we
Yeah.
needed. Everything, starboard indicators and everything for couplings and everything else on this, our tools to bring it up there, and we throw over the hook, go to pull it up, and smack up against the side of the ship because of the weather. The hasp breaks. All our tools
No.
go in the water.
Oh
About a
man.
mile down. Okay, so now we're out here. We've got nothing with us. So basically, we had to go to the chief on board and try to see what we could do, different departments, and
improvise.
to improvise
Yeah.
and get it all to work. But in the end, we got it to work, and we were able to fix it. And basically,
God bless.
took apart. We ended up taking apart the switch and opened up the gear in the back and fixed it and welded new brackets on the back and everything. But you're talking back then, that ship was already about 60 years old and was due to be decommissioned.
Wow.
So that ship actually made it about another 18 months, I would say, before it was decommissioned. But
Wow.
it still did, plenty of
So
procedures. So
that condition that you just kind of discussed, I was like, thinking of like a movie in my head while you were talking about that. I was painting that into a movie scene almost. Did you have any like you and your crew? Did you guys have any kind of like special training on how to handle these like boat transfers and whatnot? I mean, 40-foot waves. I can only imagine. I go to Jones Beach in Long Island and I'm getting taken out by a 5-foot wave. And I'm tumbling on the beach. So, to handle a scenario like that, you were either all in amazing shape and just out of your minds,
out of our minds.
out of your mind, or you had some kind of training to be able to get onto the boat.
Well, I mean, quite honestly, like we went through a little bit of training
Yeah.
that they do for safety, but to be honest with you, most of it is just you kind of almost in a way kind of fear for your life once in a while. You just
Yeah.
kind of do what you have to do.
You're kind of just like fight or flight. Like either I'm gonna make it or I'm not.
Yes, yes, it really is. It
Wow.
really is. So, yeah, most of the training that you get is just, the Coast Guard put you through a certain amount of training that you have
Wow.
to do.
So
But that's it. It's not
what's
really
like what's the
too
mindset
extensive.
when you're approaching that? Like, what do you think? What's going through your head?
At that point, it's kind of like, oh, you know, we knew that you have a job to do, and you know that you're probably at that point the only one who's out there who's going to be able to do this.
Wow.
And at that point, the ship had no control technically at that point. So you're talking, this is a hurricane. It's already okay. It's been downgraded already from category 4 to category 3 and into, but it's a mess.
Wow.
And ships have been taken down in far less weather
Oh,
than
I
that.
bet. Yeah.
So when
You hear
you don't
stories all the
have
time.
control of the vessel, that's
It's scary.
yeah, that's when
Yeah.
things are. So you know that you're out there. That's the time that you have to make something happen,
Wow.
and you really don't think about all that stuff. It's just what's next,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, I'm sure you've done it. You've been out here doing electrical work.
Yeah. You
You
get into a
get into that
situation and
position,
you
you
just have to
have to make it happen.
you just have to make a decision,
Yeah,
and hope that you're making the right decision. And when you
yeah,
get out of it, you analyze it and almost try and implement a procedure behind
exactly.
how to handle those situations in the future.
Yeah, and when those emergency situations arise, they kind of, the whole going through procedure to get,
Yeah.
that's out the
Goes out the
window at that
window.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just make it happen and then write a report when you're done.
Paperwork.
Yeah.
So, given your extensive experience on the naval side of the electrical construction business, when did you make the shift to start handling, what you're doing now, which is the solar and energy efficiency side? And tell us a little bit about that and the types of projects you're working on.
So basically, when working with the Navy, we I had started to phase it out a little bit because, family life, having children and stuff like this, the travel became really crazy. It's kind of funny because where I'm at now with travel is kind of crazy too, but in a different
In a
way.
different way, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But back then it was like you went, you did the job, just getting to the job was a job in itself. Okay, that was half the battle. Okay, getting there. So then what ended up happening is I started to focus on something at the time that was coming about was geothermal homes and stuff. So I
Yeah.
kind of said I'm going to try to stick local, and we're going to get into this geothermal house thing. So we worked with that a little bit, and it was pretty interesting. Didn't really last very long, and didn't pan out, and that kind of led to the into like doing some off-grid solar for farms,
Gotcha.
okay, for like thoroughbred horses and stuff,
Oh, wow.
so that in the wintertime and stuff like this, like their water troughs don't, they still have lights in the barn, their water troughs don't freeze and stuff like this. You got $1 million horse, you don't want it freezing. You got to have a, nice warm stall and this kind of thing. So we did a bit of that for a little bit, and again, didn't last very long. And then all of a sudden, the one of my contacts from the military said, "Hey, you know, he but still been keeping in contact with me a little bit." And he says, "You know what? We want to get into this whole solar thing. It's coming around." And believe me, solar back then is not solar of today. I mean, you
No,
were
yeah, it's
talking,
completely
30
different.
watt panels and stuff like that, not, the panels that we have today. And I said, "Yeah, sure. Let's see what you got." And he had a local base to the house. And he said, "We want to go and put solar on the guard shacks so that it's right out where everybody can see it, and it looks like the government is doing their thing for getting into green energy." So as everybody rides down the highway and they ride past the gate, here's little solar panels on top of the guard shack, and
Aesthetic solar panels.
exactly. So they put it on there, and they found out immediately that even though they were very, very low performance panels, it served a purpose,
Yeah.
and it worked for what they wanted to do. And then 2 years later, we put a half a megawatt in the field out in front. So it's that was kind of the progression. So I started going from that point. Got into a little bit of house, solar
Yeah, a
panels
little
for people's
residential.
houses. Not
Nothing
very
crazy.
much. It wasn't really my thing.
So from the
So
so from the small applications for the military and then dabbling a bit with the residential side, which you and I have spoke, it was a little bit different than dealing with larger
yeah,
commercial sized applications. Tell us about some of the projects you're doing now, to current date and, the scale. I know you're flying, you're always texting me you're in a different state like every 2 days. So what are some of the projects you're working on? And what type of technology are you using to integrate the solar and the whole package to make it, kind of with current dates,
Yeah,
technology and systems?
right. So, like I said, back then in the day, the systems were really antiquated. They were small, and happily, most 90%, I would say, of those old systems are still operational today. But what we did is we took the change and we ended up started getting into commercial. Okay, and by getting into these larger commercial sites and then also into like the community solar markets,
Hmm.
we're talking now you have a lot of medium voltage, primary voltage solar systems that we're putting up on a lot of these cold storage facilities, warehouses, larger department stores, things like this. Um, uh, we've really changed in the styles that we do. We've done everything from ground mounts to
Yeah.
flat roof style mounts, type of thing. Some of the systems are ballasted, some of them are adhered to the roof, actually bolted in to
Yeah.
the roofs themselves. Some of the systems we're doing are things like Amazons and, yeah, like I said, the larger cold storage across the country.
Yeah.
And that's where, like you said, like I'm always traveling, we have a lot of cold storage across the country that we're doing. What's really interesting about how we integrate, we do a lot of BESS systems for battery energy storage. And those systems we integrate with the solar. And this way we can change how we're going to throw different electronic packages. We can change how we're going to, whether we're either going to charge from solar, we're going to charge from the grid or off peaks. And this way we can break down those demands and take that away. Generally speaking, one of my projects we've done, 3 megawatt system we put up on a rooftop was 109,000 a month was their electric bill,
Wow.
and we cut them down to $26,000. Was
That's a
so
major incentive.
yeah, yes. As a matter of fact, in the area that they are, they became what's known as an island. Okay, so this way the system is, so when the power company themselves have to go and do work on their systems, they allow that backfeed to take over, change over some circuitry, and now they can actually feed the town. So
Wow.
that's really kind of, where it's at nowadays is you can actually take that knowledge that we've gained over the years, and it's not just for, saving the money of, to the incentivizer, but you can actually take that technology and actually help the community around it as well, which is
Wow.
really great, from that aspect. We also integrate a lot of our EV charging that we do with it, so which is really great because there's EVs are just such a big thing, and as you know,
Huge.
yeah, and the infrastructure out there is just it's really antiquated. It's horrible.
It's bad, and
Yeah,
that's the problem too. Aside from, it's great to implement all these new energy efficient solutions, but the infrastructure that is powering or receiving the power back from these systems needs to be upgraded as well, which
hmm.
is a completely different can of worms that I don't think we have the time to unpack today. And
Oh my
maybe
gosh.
maybe we could do a follow up episode on the utility infrastructure and just kind of
We'll have to
the
talk some
age.
about third stage harmonics.
Yeah, exactly. It's, throughout the time, the infrastructure has not been upgraded to handle all the initiatives and technology in general, all
Yeah.
the electronic devices, computer screens, all the different, applications that kind of feed back into the overall grand scheme, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But it's great. You guys have some great projects going on, some very large projects, and it's also volume.
Oh yeah.
You're not doing just one-off installs. You're certainly an expert, to say the least, in this industry, wealth of knowledge. And one question I would like to ask you before we end today is how important is attention to detail in the electrical construction industry?
Attention to detail is probably your premium thing that you really need to do. Electricity is dangerous, and like you said before, everybody takes it for granted, but it's dangerous. Okay, we've come so used to the fact that becoming accustomed to having it at our fingertips that we just, as a civilization across the globe, we just think that it just exists somehow. Somehow it's brought to you.
It just showed
It
up.
just showed up here. Yeah, it's on the scene here, where we everything we have, right? But people don't realize that outside of illnesses, it's the number one cause of death in the world. Is people literally die from electrocutions
Yeah.
across the world.
So to backtrack what you just said, not to cut you off, 74 or 75% of building fires are caused by electric.
Yeah.
You know, some people may think, you know, somebody threw a cigarette in a trash can, or, you know, it was hot out and the dry leaves caught. No, it's, you know, electricity is
electrical
causing
fire.
74 to 75% of the building fires in America.
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's huge. It is a real problem, and attention to detail is massive. And what people don't realize too is when it comes to solar and things like that, attention to detail is unbelievably imperative because not only is it electricity, but it's DC, and it literally can be a friendly, happy day up there, or it can look like Godzilla's on the roof.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if DC, you know, if there's a problem with DC, it's just going to blow up.
It just goes.
It just goes. There's no stopping it.
Yeah, and that's it. It's just it. Until there's nothing left for it to burn.
Yep.
It's just it. So you really have to be careful. So the last step to what we do with our company is we have a nationwide O&M department that we do. So after we've taken these projects, we literally take them from conception to fruition and then beyond. So the idea is that we want, since we've built these projects along the way, we do construction management for other companies along the way if they need it to ensure that these are safe. And then we take them and make sure that those people who made those investments continue to reap the rewards of those investments for years to come. Make sure that they don't have problems and that they actually do produce what they were supposed to produce. You know, so if you start having failures on these systems due to whatever reason, whether it be, you know, malfunction of equipment, or whether it be, you know, due to, you know, breakdown from just from workers actually not performing their tasks properly, then you know, you're going to have breakdown in the system, and it's not going to operate properly. And we make sure we instill that whoever is actually ultimately making the money on this system, you know, is going to continue to do so.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. We also do a bit of quite a bit of actually of off-market commercial real estate, so that when there is something that needs to be brought in, we have those entitlements on these lands so that we can, you know, build projects and that kind of thing. So, you know, we can start going right through the process.
Very interesting, Walter.
Yeah.
Listen, I thank you very much for coming here today to share with us your knowledge and your experience throughout the years in the industry. You know, you definitely make the industry sound fun.
Oh, it's fun.
To say the least, you know, because a lot of people look at our industry as very technical, very mundane, you know, and clearly there's a lot of excitement throughout the process of building the, you know, the different types of projects we build in our industry. So I really appreciate you coming here today, giving us a deep background on your naval experience and insight on the, you know, solar work you guys are doing today. You know, and I just want to thank you for that and say much appreciated.
Appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching another episode of the Beyond the Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Marcelino Jr. with Lapolis Electric, Vice President of Sales. Thank you for watching.